Ken Greenberg grew up in the boroughs of New York City. He now calls Toronto home. One of his passions is renewing city cores. On a good day, he turns urban spaces back into places that inspire us rather than bad burbs that disturb us sometimes. Greenberg works in urban settings all over the world. He's an architect, designer, teacher, writer, and founding partner of Greenberg Consultants. His new book is called Walking Home. It is my pleasure to welcome Ken Greenberg to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you. I suspect you've walked this city.
I have. I enjoy it every time I come here.
And are you impressed? Not impressed?
I'm very impressed, and I love to see how things turn out. It's always fun to come back every once in a while. I also like to cycle the city. So one of my pastimes whenever I go someplace is I'll get a bicycle, and between walking and cycling, it's just the best way to see a place.
Well, you'd be happy to know we have some new bike lanes.
I am very jealous.
A little controversial, but you know, we're getting used to them and all of that. But I know you do a lot of work in Scandinavia, and because there's a lot of buildings in small space and whatever, they seem to have really good bike lanes.
Copenhagen has really figured it out. It is, the main thing is it's comfortable for kids and it's comfortable for older people. You don't have to be a kamikaze. You don't have to be constantly watching your back. And a simple thing like knowing when you come to an intersection, how to make a left turn. In our cities, and Vancouver is actually picking up a lot of tricks from cities like Copenhagen, it has always been a problem. You don't know whether you should be with the pedestrians, with the traffic, where to go. And suddenly when you do those things to make it safer, so many more people feel comfortable about getting on their bikes.
Sure, and safety is a big factor.
Absolutely.
No question, because there are also a lot of people who park and open the door and knock you right off your bike. I guess you know about that.
The door prize.
Very much so. So cities are a bit of an emotional touchstone for you. When did it begin?
It really began when I was a kid, long before I ever thought about these things in an organized way. I followed the usual progression with my family, leaving Brooklyn, where I was born, and started to grow up and moving out to the suburbs. And then we did a different move. We moved to Geneva, Switzerland. And as a 14-year-old adolescent, I found myself back in a city. And one of the first things I had to do was get a driver's license for my bicycle to pass a road test and get a little plaque to put on the bike. And I discovered that nobody had to drive me anywhere. I had the whole city at my fingertips between the bike and the tramway and walking. And it hit me, even as a young kid, that being modern didn't necessarily mean moving out to the suburbs the way I had been brainwashed, like everyone else, to think. And that kind of stuck with me until later I decided to go into architecture, and it came back into real sharp focus.
Sure. Well, as you suggest in Walking Home, we abused the cities and then we fled.
Yep.
Got to the burbs as fast as we could, sometimes in a DeSoto or on a Sunday drive or something like that. So to revitalize a static city, a dead city, where do you begin?
Well, the foundation is the public realm. The thing that lasts in cities longer than anything else, buildings come and go, uses come and go, but the way you lay out the streets, the blocks, the parks, the squares, the trails, interestingly, even in the oldest cities, those are the traces that remain. So in my line of work, getting that right and sometimes making those moves that cross over barriers, that connects things, that get us to the water's edge, which has become a big deal in contemporary life, the recycling of obsolescent rail lines into trails, all those things are really critical.
Well, as you know, the waterfront is a very exciting place to be and to walk and to experience. In Toronto here, wherever there's a waterfront.
Half of my work over the years has been on waterfronts, from Amsterdam, where I worked on the 7 islands north of the railway station along the River Ai, to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, St. Paul on the Mississippi. That urge to get to the water just seems to be very powerful in human nature, not least of which in Vancouver.
And what makes a waterfront work, urban-wise, like key elements?
Well, it's in ecology, there's this wonderful tone, ecotone, where different environments overlap and where you get the richest kind of life. And that mixing of a great natural feature, a seafront, a great lake, a river, and human activity in the city has a kind of magic to it. So having lively parts of the city come to a very public edge is really the key.
A place where you can eat, a place where you can drink, a place where you can play with your children.
Walk on a boardwalk, ride your bike, sit out, get a coffee, get an ice cream, just basic creature comforts.
Makes so much sense. However, we have seen some waterfronts that aren't so pretty.
And some end up being very private. Even if they're not literally fenced off, not everybody feels comfortable. So a trick is making them in such a way that everyone in society, all ages, all conditions, whether you have change in your pocket or not, you feel like you're welcome.
Sure. And as you know, as North Americans, we like to own our land and own our beach. In Europe, they're more stewards of the land, it seems to me. You spend a lot more time there than I have, but you can go on somebody's private property and have a picnic, and they don't seem to mind at times.
Well, we're coming to the idea that you shouldn't fence off parts of waterfronts, but for a long time, the first generation of condo development in many cities, when these old industrial areas were turned around, had private waterfront properties that were fenced off. And I think people realized that the great value actually extends upland or inland quite a distance, and this is something for the whole community to enjoy.
What about light in a city? Take me to the financial district, New York City, other big city. High towers, not much light. How important is light?
Light is really important, and as one of my colleagues from New York, Jonathan Barnett, likes to say, it's not how dense you make it, it's how you make it dense. So shaping buildings, and an early New York City bylaw was actually based on the idea of getting light down into those canyons. It was a reaction to some of the closing in that was happening. So there are ways to, and Vancouver has done a lot of work in this regard, to space high buildings to make sure that where you want to have lively shopping streets, you get hours of sunlight. And fortunately now we have the means to actually, with computer simulations, to test that and really understand how it works.
And the glass towers seem to help. They reflect.
Yeah, we get
You
a lot
agree?
of, well, it depends when, but we have some conditions where you get double sunrises or double sunsets, where you literally have light bouncing off buildings. Now, mind you, you don't want everything to be a glass tower. That can get a little monotonous, but having that variety is really important.
Well, there was a race, as you know, a few years ago, many years ago, to have the highest tower in the city. I think Chicago had an insurance, was it Prudential, and the big claim was, we're the highest tower.
Right.
How high do you think a tower should be in a big city?
Well, first of all, I'd say,
how do you figure that out?
fortunately, North Americans have gotten over the idea that we're going to have the highest, so that those kudos now go to other people, so that's a good thing.
Like Hong Kong or where?
Yeah. No, actually it's in Asia primarily and in the Middle East. But this issue of the height of buildings is really significant. I like high buildings. I don't like them everywhere. There should be a variety of neighborhoods and cities. Not everything should be the same cookie cutter template. And so you really have to look at the context. You have to look at how it fits with what's there. I was really interested that when Vancouver came to do the Olympic Village, having sort of pioneered this formula of tower and podium base, a decision was made to try something else. The greatest cities, in my view, actually have that variety of built form. That's certainly characteristic of North America. We will never have the uniformity that you have in a Paris, for example.
Or the arrondissement.
Yeah.
Those are so great.
They're
or are they? Spokes in the city, streets going out?
Well, they are, and what often goes with that kind of density are courtyards, wonderful courtyards. I lived and worked in one of those Parisian courtyards where half the people surrounding the courtyard were living there, the other half were working there. I was doing both. And there's just something magical about the quiet in the courtyard compared to the busy street outside.
Very much so, whether you're at the Rodin or someplace else. But it's true, it's the plaza idea in any big city is so fabulous. The green space, the public art.
Well, and that's the other thing. With great density, cities are also becoming greener. That's really exciting. That cities are becoming more park-like as parks become more city-like.
And kids need places to play because families are moving back to the cities.
That's,
you say.
That's a big lesson we can learn from Scandinavia. They are making kid-friendly cities. They want young people to feel like they don't have to move out to the suburbs when time comes to raise kids. So you'll see in every new cluster of buildings, there are playgrounds for toddlers, there are places for adolescents, there are places for kids of all ages, and seniors is another big challenge. We have this big baby boomer generation coming along, getting older. The day we take away the car keys is a crisis. So we have to be making places in our cities for seniors to live where they can walk out the door of their apartments and buy their groceries and get medical services. All
Walk
those things
to
right
theater,
there.
walk to dinner, have a few drinks, walk home.
Absolutely, and be independent.
Why not? Because as you know, we have very strict drinking driving laws, so it makes sense to live near the fancy restaurant.
Absolutely.
We'll come back with Ken Greenberg walking home his book, The Life and Lessons of a City Builder.